By the 1960s, New York City had a large population of people who had grown up in Puerto Rico. At the time, New York state law required all voters to pass a literacy test in English before they cast a ballot. New York officials argued that this law was meant to encourage immigrants to learn English and intelligently exercise the franchise. But there was evidence that the law was passed out of prejudice in an effort to disenfranchise non-English speakers. Even though Puerto Rican migrants were entitled to vote because their primary education had been in Spanish, they couldn't pass the literacy tests. Congress passed the Voting Rights Act, or VRA, in 1965. Section 4E of the VRA specifically provided that people who had successfully completed the 6th grade at an accredited school in Puerto Rico could not be turned away from the polls due to the inability to read or write English. Morgan and other registered voters in New York City sued in federal district court Attorney General Nicholas Katzenbach, the New York Board of Elections, and others. The plaintiffs argued that Section 4E of the VRA was unconstitutional because it barred enforcement of New York's English literacy requirement and limited New York's right to set its own franchise requirements. A divided 3-judge district court panel held that Section 4E was unconstitutional because Congress exceeded its authority by usurping rights reserved to the states under the 10th Amendment. The court granted summary judgment and injunctive relief for the plaintiffs. Katzenbach appealed directly to the United States Supreme Court. Justice Brennan, writing for the majority, reversed. Brennan relied on the enforcement clause in Section 5 of the 14th Amendment. Under the enforcement clause, Congress has broad power to enforce the Equal Protection Clause. Brennan said that the enforcement clause operated much like the Necessary and Proper Clause. Thus, the test articulated in McCulloch v. Maryland for determining whether an act of Congress was valid under the Necessary and Proper Clause applied by analogy to actions taken under the Enforcement Clause. Specifically, Congress may pass legislation to enforce the Equal Protection Clause if it is 1. For the legitimate end of ensuring equal protection, 2. Plainly adapted to that end, and 3. Not prohibited, or in other words, is consistent with the letter and spirit of the Constitution. The court found that Section 4E of the VRA was an appropriate enactment to enforce the Equal Protection Clause, specifically to prevent unequal treatment under the law of the Puerto Rican community in New York. Section 4E was plainly adapted to that end and was consistent with the Constitution. Because there was a conflict between the New York state law and federal law, state law was trumped by federal law under the Supremacy Clause. Justice Harlan dissented, finding that Section 4E did not respect the separation of powers between the judiciary and legislature. Harlan found that as a state, New York had authority to regulate its own franchise requirements. He went on to say that all government classifications challenged under the Equal Protection Clause should be subject to rational basis review, which New York had satisfied. Harlan believed that the court's ruling in Lassiter v. Northampton Election Board was controlling. That case held that states could constitutionally require literacy tests to vote. Katzenbach v. Morgan is an important voting and civil rights case to be sure. But perhaps more than that, this case illustrates just how broad is Congress's power to legislate under the Enforcement Clause of the 14th Amendment in order to guarantee equal protection under the law, even into realms traditionally understood to be within the power of the states. Moreover, this case shows just how much the court is willing to defer to Congress on such matters. If you found this video helpful, you can explore all of our content by visiting us at Quimbee.com. If you have a question or comment about this case, please post it in the comments area below, and we'll do our best to get back to you. If you think we did a good job with this video, please like, share, and favorite it. And if you think this video might be helpful to people you know, please share on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+ as well, to get this video out there. If you haven't done so already and you enjoy watching videos on this channel, click on the red subscribe button just below this video so you can get all the latest updates.